welcome to this edition of Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I'm Dustin, and today I have the pleasure of being here with Neil Chambers, who is the CEO and founder of ChambersDesign. Thank you so much for being here, Neil.
My pleasure.
So we are going to talk a little bit about your background and about ChambersDesign. So first of all, ChambersDesign is, can you explain what it is? I won't guess.
The way that I like to describe it is a contemporary design company that's based in research. So we're a research-based design company, and what we do is architectural design, and we focus on sustainability and green buildings.
Okay, so for our viewers who are not familiar with either sustainability or green, can you explain in layman's terms?
Sure.
What that is?
Well, let me kind of back up a little bit and help it, because it always gives a little bit of background.
Okay.
So, green building came out of this idea of sustainability, and sustainability kind of grew out of environmental awareness. So, how do we live on the planet more with a smaller footprint? How do we use less energy, less water? How do we use materials that are non-toxic and stuff like that? And so, green building kind of really comes out of that. So the goal of green building is to build buildings or cities or infrastructure that is more aligned with the natural world, and also takes less from the natural world.
Okay, so for example, when you're thinking about the types of material to use, does that mean that you will use materials that are found locally, or does that mean materials that won't destroy the current geography or combination?
Some kind of typical ways that people think about materials, non-toxic materials, so things like non-VOC or
non-what?
Non-VOC. Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, green building is full of jargon, just to let you know. So VOC is volatile organic compounds, and these can be carcinogens or other types of toxins that new fresh paint smell is actually toxins coming out of the paint, and that's when you get a headache.
Okay.
So non-VOC paints don't give you a headache, and they don't smell. So when you walk into a house that's been painted with non-VOC paints, you don't even know that it's been painted, except that you can see the color is rich and vibrant. So those are some things. You mentioned local materials. That's also a big thing about sustainability, because local materials usually take less energy to get to a site. They're supporting the local economy, which is also kind of part of sustainability. Recycled content's another piece, or something. Everybody knows what recycled content is. Rapidly renewable materials is another thing. So things that will regenerate within 10 years. So not hardwoods or rainforest trees or stuff like that, but instead things that like cottons and wools and stuff like that, or bamboo, which will come back.
So these are things that are almost like compostable in a sense, or do you mean that they
do sometimes them being biodegradable or compostable go hand in hand, because you're working with things that are less processed, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you give us an example of a project that your company has done that has been both sustainable and green?
Well, yeah. I mean, the goal is to. Yeah, I can. So just kind of give you another little bit. We do a lot of big buildings. Our projects usually range between 100,000 square feet and up. So we're usually doing big projects. And
sometimes I can't quite.
So what's 100,000?
Is that like a Costco warehouse?
Yeah, that would be about a Costco warehouse.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
Depending on how big it is. Yeah.
All right. So we're talking big.
It's
really
big. Yeah. So it's a big buildings, and big buildings. The reason that's really our sweet spot, because they take a lot of energy to run, and we know how to help reduce the amount of energy they need. A good example, we're finishing a project now. It's for a client that's in New York City. They are proposing a 1 million plus square foot building, which is like an entire city block, basically. And they wanted to see if it could be net zero. And net zero just means that the building would only use as much energy as it could produce on site, right? Yeah. So that's where sustainability is really going. That's where green building is really going. And so it being in New York, an urban area, makes it really difficult to do that. You're on a confined site, which also constrains the potential of being net zero. it's a mixed building, a mixed use building, so it has a lot of different uses in it. It's not just residential or just commercial. It's residential and commercial and hospitality and a lot of other stuff that's going on. So what we did is the reason we're research based is that we don't just start to propose solutions. We actually want to work with clients in a way of saying, let's figure out what's the best solution. Okay. So we don't come to the table. We come to the table with like a bag of tricks, but but it's not necessarily defined yet. So we don't think about style first. We think about solutions, and we do this research and analysis. And what we found with this project is that we could eliminate 93% of its energy costs every year, which represents over $3 million of energy cost savings every 12 months.
And that's all based on the materials that you choose and
the
type of
materials, your energy systems. So like a building uses a lot of energy. The biggest kind of is, if you looked at a pie chart of how a building uses energy, half of it would go to heating and cooling and lighting. And the other half would go to things like plug loads, fans, pumps, these kinds of things that most people don't really care about, the really unsexy stuff. But so what we're trying to do is find ways to really, really make heating and cooling the most energy efficient. And that has a lot to do with the skin. So a building's exterior is really the kind of, if you think about it, it's the place where if it's not done well, you have to use a lot of energy. And if it's done really well, you can reduce your energy use by 20 to 30%.
Just annually?
I mean, yeah, annually, just from your skin. And then that will help reduce your mechanical systems, which are usually 20% of your budget. So if you really start to save on your skin and everything, it starts to help reduce the first cost or the construction cost of your building.
Which is the exterior, which you're talking about.
Skin envelope and facade all mean the same thing. It basically is the outside of your building.
So sometimes people, when they think of like green buildings or sustainable buildings, they think, well, that's nice, but they're not going to be very attractive. Or inside they'll have the half like dimly lit light bulbs and stuff like that.
Right.
How true is that, or is that completely false? I mean, or is that more of a 70s type of?
Well, I would say that green buildings should be better than any building you've ever been in. It should look better than any building you've ever seen.
Okay.
I mean, that's the real challenge, I think. I think it's from my perspective and the way that we approach projects is that you have to have like the quantitative stuff, like we're talking about energy use and stuff, but you also have to have the qualitative stuff. It has to have a soul and a spirit. You want to feel like you're somewhere. You can make an office building have some of the greatest spaces that you've ever been in, as long as they're designed well. So if you go into a green building and it doesn't look good, or it's boring and it's not lit well, it's a bad building even if it's green. So we don't want to just make bad green buildings. We want to make like really amazing green buildings, because I think that the goal is to attract people to sustainability. That's like, I want that building. That's what I want to do. That's how I want to design my building. And we do a lot of hospitals. And healthcare is an area that needs a tremendous amount of attention around sustainability and better spaces, quite honestly.
And are you saying that because of because there are patients there, or because of the fact that it's medicine and the types of things that you would have to do in a hospital, or combination?
So, I mean, think about it. If every hospital in the United States saved 20% on their energy bill yearly, that would save over $1 billion to the overall healthcare industry. So when we talk about like we should save money on insurance and all this other stuff, like if hospitals were just more efficient, you could take out $1 billion of cost.
Just annually.
Just annually, right there. And that's about design. The other thing is that hospitals use more energy per square foot than all other buildings except one type.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So and the only type of building that uses more energy than hospitals is fast food restaurants. So like the idea of like how why are hospitals only getting beaten by fast food restaurants when they should, or they could become the the way in which all buildings can be designed. I mean, hospitals are very complex. They got lots of equipment and stuff in them. But if you can design hospitals really green and efficient, it makes all other building types so much easier.
Wow. So what are the types of things that I'm assuming that when you approach a hospital, it's already a hospital that is a standing hospital, or are you talking about hospitals that are that will be made in the future?
We do a lot of new construction.
Okay.
But we do, the principles that we apply to new construction can be applied to existing buildings, and you can get the same results. I mean, so I'm
curious, like what kinds of, so for an existing hospital, since you said that, second to fast food restaurants, they use the most energy, what types of things do you introduce to an existing hospital? And we just have a couple minutes, but.
Sure. I mean, there's simple things like lighting. You can look at your lighting, but also look at. You got to also back up, because hospitals. The history of healthcare in hospitals is that they used to be a place where you went to die.
Okay.
So, healthcare and hospital design comes from, that's their history. That people were isolated in them. And so there's all these regulations about infectious control, because you don't want people who are sick getting other people sick. So there's ventilation requirements that you have to adhere to, and you can't open windows, and there's certain amounts of lighting that are necessary, and the way that things have to be heated and cooled are very different than in other buildings. So, approaching those things, one of the things that we try to do automatically is look at how can we connect the patient to the natural world. So that's one of the big things: views, daylight, materials in patient rooms that are more, stress relieving instead of stress causing, colors. These are just some of the things that we would do to start to help kind of work in the green features for a hospital.
Okay, thank you so much. We're actually going to come back because I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the cost involved.
Sure.
And so we'll be right back. This is Dustin from Dustin's Kaleidoscope. We're here with Neil Chambers from ChambersDesign, and we'll be back in a moment.
Local government, local educational institutions, and local community members all use cable access TV to communicate their message. They depend upon it as an affordable means of outreach. Public, educational, and government access television empowers local government agencies, individuals, and groups to use the media to speak directly to their constituents in a more direct and cost-effective way. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Welcome back to this edition of Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I'm here with Neil Chambers of ChambersDesign, and before the break we were talking specifically about hospitals, and I wanted to talk a little bit about cost, but I know that in your book, Urban, can you tell us a little bit about the name of the book? And
Sure.
Because I think that encompasses some of the cost aspect of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the book's called Urban Green Architecture for the Future. I started writing it, probably in 2008. I guess I sat down. I wanted to write about I felt that the conversation around sustainability and green design was getting a little bit too conventional in some ways, and that solutions that were being offered to the public wouldn't necessarily work if you kind of looked at them as a long-term goal.
Oh, okay.
And also I wanted to look at buildings. So my background is architecture and looking at building specific projects, but we've also done larger urban design projects and also ecological restoration projects, habitat restoration, and working on these bigger scale projects. I started to really see that some of the things that we said were green in a building don't flesh out on the larger scale, and like the kind of the components of how buildings are related to infrastructure and things like that.
No, well, why is that? So why would there be a disconnect between what people perceive as being green or what is thought to be green and the actual building or the...
Yeah, so I mean, there's things like, one of the things, so cost is always a big issue, and I guess just to touch on that really quick is that a green building shouldn't cost more.
Okay.
I really don't think it should. I mean, now that's with the understanding that what you're trying to build that building at is at a place where you're going to get a certain type of building. I mean, if you're just bare bones, you could see an increase. But even that, that's not always the case.
Okay.
So, but what I was looking at were bigger issues around like water, energy, transportation, these kind of topics that are, I think, a lot of people are talking about, cars and emissions, infrastructure. People, I think, around the country, the U.S., is that there's this big debate about how we're going to improve our infrastructure, how are we going to renew our infrastructure, and how are we going to do it in a budget restricted future. Okay. And what I started to see with some of the work that I was doing was that there were big infrastructural solutions that cost a fraction of what people were suggesting. And so it was like this whole opportunity of like, we can renew cities, we can change the way regions work at a fraction of the cost. I mean, literally a fraction of the cost. And so one of the examples, we started doing this project in South Carolina in a place called Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
And we were doing oyster restoration. And we started this estuary, it's called Withers Estuary. And it's one of the most polluted bodies of water on the East Coast, and it used to not be. It used to be where everybody went to learn to swim. It actually is where Myrtle Beach started. The first post office was on the banks of Withers. The first house was on Withers, but it's gotten so dilapidated that almost no one under the age of 60 knows that Withers is there. So it's like, I mean, it's literally like, it's in the middle of the town and no one knows it's there because it's so hidden and it's so dirty. So what we started to do, we looked at what could we do to improve the quality of the water, and we found that oysters would be something that could do that. And the reason for that is that oysters can filter 4 gallons of water every hour.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, they're like these little bitty like vacuum cleaners of badness, I guess, and there used to be billions of oysters up and down the East Coast in the Gulf of Mexico. And so over the last 100 or 110, 120 years, they've basically collapsed in 85% of their habitats to where they're considered functionally extinct, meaning they don't play a role in their ecology anymore. Okay. But they're keystone species. Okay. And what a keystone species is that it's a species that holds together an entire ecosystem.
Oh, so without them there,
you start to have collapse of other species like mammals and birds and aquatic vegetation and all this other stuff. So we were like, well, let's restore them. Let's put them back in. And so over the process of, and we're still doing this every year, we started restoring the reefs in Withers. And
when did you start this? You said in 2000?
We started it. I mean, I guess we started in 2007.
Okay.
But then, we really started. I think we put our first reefs in 2008, and every year since then we've been putting a reef in. And now, like, the first reefs have oysters all over them, and the new reefs are like. And so there's this whole idea that project has cost us almost nothing. I mean, the truth is that the first few years it was all volunteer. We're working with the Coastal Carolina University, that's in South Carolina, and, with a guy there named Dr. Keith Walters, and he's an oyster expert. And it's all been volunteer, and this whole idea that to scale it up, what I started to realize is that so oysters not only clean the water, but they protect the shoreline. They stop storm surges. They help erosion. They create places where fisheries, so you can replenish fish populations. They sequester carbon, so they're a climate change solution. They remove nitrogen from the water column and from the habitat, which has all these other negative. So like things like algae blooms don't happen, so you don't have all these fish kills and stuff. So they have all this tremendous effort, and you can replace them at almost no cost. And so what that started to do, and that's why I started writing this book. My book, In Urban Green, was about that. Was about how there's all these solutions that have big impacts, and they're at a fraction of the cost. And that our conversation today about sustainability and things like, I'll talk about LED lighting and, I'll talk about materials all day long till I'm blue in the face. But the truth is, like, if we really want to look at like big solutions, they're out there, and they don't cost that much money. And that's really that's what the book's all about. And it kind of lays all that stuff out.
So urban green sounds like it is the architecture of just a green or sustainable society, as opposed to piecemealing it with a hospital here or a building there. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is sort of a blueprint of
it's
everything together.
Exactly. I tried to write a book that's like, here's all the pieces. Here's what does work. Here's what doesn't work. Here's what we know, what we don't know, and let's start looking at this on like a national scale or a global scale of putting things back into place. Now that means that you have to change the way you think about what a city is and where cities are placed, and what, how we move from point A to point B. And so there's changes, but it actually improves our life. And when we think about how we're cash strapped as a society, with debt and all this other stuff, it's like there's ways that can improve the lifestyle and quality of life for people, throughout society, and that can be long term. And that's really what I was kind of trying to talk about.
Okay, and just want to mention it again, Urban Green, and where can people get the
So we have a Facebook page, so it's, facebook.com/architecture for the future.
Architecture for the Future.
Yeah, all one word.
And Urban Green, can I get it on Amazon?
Yep, you can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Mainly online is the best place to get it.
Okay, and other than your Facebook page, do you have another website?
So, ChambersDesignInc.com is my company's website.
Okay.
It's a great, you can get all the information there. I mean, there's other sites as well, but I think those are the two big, you can get it.
Okay, the Facebook page.
The Facebook page for the book, and then the ChambersDesignInc.com for my company, which has a bunch of different projects we've worked on.
Oh, that's
everything.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get back to the oyster estuary. So you just demonstrated that there's a pretty inexpensive solution to a pretty big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't more people? Why isn't it that more people aren't actually? Is it because they're ignorant of, that something that simple can create such a huge positive change, or is it there's an easier way?
I got my theories. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound crazy, but like, I think it kind of boils down to two things. I think first, infrastructure has always been thought as like heavy infrastructure. You got to build a dam or a road.
Oh, okay.
It's got to be something really heavy, concrete and steel intensive.
Right.
And that's what infrastructure is. Like a power plant, or like a big wind turbines. It's got to be big and steel or metal of some sort. So I think that's one thing. And I think the other thing is that we're just not educated. There's no education about conservation biology. Oyster restoration kind of falls into conservation biology, and so trying to, like I always say, architects shouldn't be designing buildings. Ecologists should. That's what really should be happening. I mean, it shouldn't be, engineers engineering infrastructure that kind of goes all over the landscape. It should be, biologists. It should be ecologists that are like really getting in there to help people understand how to sustain and keep together this kind of natural world that provides clean water and clean air and a whole list of other ecological services for free. Because that's really, if we're talking about a society that's going to last for the next 100 or 200 or 1,000 years.
You need somebody who has that expertise who can help you understand that
Everything,
having the oysters are
everything has to kind of start from a conservation biology perspective, right? And grow out of that. So I think the problem with I don't want to say problem. I think one of the things that we're just beginning to really see, these are all new concepts. These are not 100-year-old concepts. Evolution theory started in 1859, but healthcare, medicine didn't really catch on and start using it as a basis for medications and things for another 80 years. Architecture, engineering, landscape design, all the regional planning, city planning. It's not even really discussed as a serious topic in those disciplines yet. And so I think that's why it's not seen as like the first go-to solution.
Right.
And so like when you start to really think about, you know, unfolding and unpacking this idea of what green building sustainability can be, it's really that's where it really should be the goal. That's the big goal, the kind of the how do we restore the natural world.
All right. Neil, we have about a minute left.
Okay.
What would you, first of all, I want to tell everybody again, your book is called Urban Green. You can get it online at your Facebook page, which is?
Is facebook.com/architecture for the future.
Okay, and your website is?
ChambersDesignInc.com.
So before we leave, what could an individual do today to help with this whole, the greening and the greening movement, so to speak?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, you know, definitely how, you know, if you're a homeowner, like what can I do to make my house more sustainable, more resilient, more climate adaptive? Those are kind of the questions that I think about, and I think other people should be thinking about, especially post Superstorm Sandy.
Yes.
You know, how can I never lose power again? How can I always have at least, so I think those are some of the things. I think other things is like, you know, environmental issues and these kind of bigger issues are about the community. So it's like finding organizations within your community that need and want that volunteer help. I mean, I'm a big advocate for that kind of stuff, like get involved and then like, you know, bring your expertise, find solutions, and then start applying those.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today. Again, this is Neil Chambers of Chambers Design, and his book is Urban Green, and you can get this online. Thank you so much for being here for this edition of Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we'll see you next time.